Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We will begin soon. I know that the room will start filling soon, but I would suggest that you come closer so we don't feel too far away. Please come closer. Will we give 2 minutes to start?
I want to tell you something about the Q&A. So when
Good afternoon, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates and colleagues. A warm welcome to all, and thank you for joining us for this mandated technical dialogue on gender in transparency. My name is Miriam Nostroza. I am with UNEP, the United Nations Environment Programme. I am the head of a Global Climate Action Unit at the Climate Change Division. Well, let us remind us a little bit about climate change and what it does with communities. As we know, it affects every aspect of our lives. In a word, it affects sustainable development, whose three components are economy, environment, and societies. Sometimes we tend to speak only about aspects of sustainable development. And its impacts are not equal. As you know, vulnerabilities are heightened by inequities associated with gender, ethnicity, disability, and systemic underrepresentation. Women and girls often face the greatest challenges as climate change worsens existing inequalities, threatening their health, livelihoods, and safety. How we respond is critical. Policies that ignore gender realities risk deepening these disparities instead of addressing them. But over the years, with your national communications, your biannual update reports, etc., we have been following good news, and this is that over 85% of parties report under the UNFCCC now that include gender considerations, recognizing that integrating gender enhances the effectiveness and fairness of climate action. But this is still on the papers. We need to see the realities. And with regard to reporting obligations under the Paris Agreement, you know that right now, as we speak, there are negotiations on how to implement the enhanced transparency framework, which is the accountability mechanism of the Paris Agreement. And you have been probably hearing that this is the backbone of the Paris Agreement. So this year, as you know, parties will be submitting their first biannual transparency reports. This is where we will be checking realities in the countries. This is when we will see how good or bad countries are advancing with their national targets for contributions. And perhaps we will also be able to see how gender is included in implementing NDCs, how gender is integrated, and whether data is disaggregated to show differential impacts. So transparency is not only about accountability, it's a path to justice and a tool to unlock the support needed for inclusive and effective action. Today's dialogue will explore how to embed gender into enhanced transparency framework, review findings, and share practical tools and resources. So before we start, some housekeeping information, a few of these, just to remind you that there is a dual interpretation in English, Spanish, and French. This event, as well, is being broadcasted live on the COP29 platform and via public webcast. So before we start our discussions, let me just briefly walk you through the agenda for today's technical dialogue. We'll start by setting the scene with a discussion on gender integration in reporting under the UNFCCC and its role in transparency. Then this will be followed by questions and answers session where we can dive deeper into the topic. Then we'll shift to a session focused on catalyzing change, where we'll explore support tools and frameworks for effectively mainstreaming gender in transparency efforts. This will also be followed by questions and answers, allowing us to address any questions that arise. After that, we'll hear from countries sharing their practical examples of gender integration, followed once again by a longer question and answer session, where you can ask questions to the 5 speakers, not only to the ones that are going to be presenting in the 3 segments. Finally, we'll have concluding remarks, and this will bring today's official program to a close. So, to kick off this segment, I'd like to highlight the background of our technical dialogue. This stems from the UNFCCC's Enhanced Lima Work Program on Gender and its Gender Action Plan, specifically under Activity C.3. This initiative calls for an annual in-session dialogue on Gender Day, focusing on a thematic area that is relevant to both the Convention and the Paris Agreement. The aim is to foster coherence by addressing a broad spectrum of interconnected factors. So this year's dialogue focuses on emphasizing the critical importance of integrating gender considerations into the enhanced transparency framework. This will ensure that lessons learned and key needs are captured in the global stocktake and inform future iterations of NDCs and other climate policies. With that, let me introduce our first panelist, Fleur Newman, who leads the intergovernmental work on gender and climate under the UN, under the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement. As the gender focal point and focal point for women for the UN Climate Change Secretariat, she champions gender equality and the empowerment of women and children and girls. Fleur, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone to the second part of the Gender Day dialogue, which is about coherence, as we just heard. It's an important priority area under the Gender Action Plan, and it helps us to make the connections and linkages that are needed to be able to see where we can advance the work that we need to do under the Paris Agreement. So to help framing our discussion, I thought it would be helpful for us to recall what the Enhanced Transparency Framework, or ETF, is, where it sits within the architecture of the Paris Agreement and how it connects to other key instruments such as the Nationally Determined Contributions, or NDCs, and the Biennial Transparency Reports, or BTRs. Aiming to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change, parties obviously adopted the Paris Agreement in 2015, and with that, it established the Enhanced Transparency Framework, the ETF. The ETF is central to the design, credibility, operation of the Paris Agreement. It guides countries on reporting their greenhouse gas emissions, provide an opportunity to say what progress is being made towards their NDCs, climate change impacts and adaptation, support provided and mobilised, and support needed and received. All very important information in order for us to understand what the collective response is, and also where specific needs are need to be addressed. The ETF also includes processes for technical experts to review reported information and a multilateral peer review where countries can ask questions of one another. It's one of the key features of the Paris Agreement is that countries are to hold each other accountable, and it's done in a public setting, which then also allows for civil society and the private sector and others to be able to engage in that transparency process. In the context of the ETF, parties to the agreement are mandated to produce the biennial transparency reports, a critical reporting mechanism to enhance transparency. Parties must submit their first BTRs by 31st of December this year. Through BTRs, parties regularly provide detailed information on their greenhouse gas emissions, climate policies, adaptation efforts, financial contributions, and progress towards the nationally determined contributions. It's a standardised framework which ensures that climate-related data is reported in a consistent, comparable, and accurate manner, fostering accountability among nations. The BTR is a key step in transitioning from the previous biennial update reports and national communications to a more robust system designed to track global progress in mitigating climate change. And more than that, as the predecessor in the national communications, it provides an opportunity for countries to communicate with their citizens what's happening on climate change and what their policies are that they're doing. It could and should be the basis for telling great communication stories. The BTR plays a pivotal role in building trust among countries by creating a transparent, reliable and verifiable system for tracking climate actions and commitments. It enables a comprehensive assessment of how countries are advancing towards their NDCs, ensuring alignment with the collective goals of the Paris Agreement, particularly the target of limiting global temperature rise to well below 2 degrees, with efforts to limit it to below 1.5 degrees. By providing clear insights into national and global progress, the BTR strengthens the basis for international cooperation and informed decision-making. Moreover, the BTR contributes to identifying gaps in climate action and support, such as technology transfer, capacity building and climate finance, fostering a more equitable and effective response to the climate crisis. Before going to the next slide, I just want to make a brief mention about the national communications. Prior to the Paris Agreement, parties under the Convention were required to produce their national communications every 4 years. Starting from the date the reports are first due under the Paris Agreement, parties may submit their national communications and biennial transparency report as a single report. The intention is to streamline the reporting process so that BTRs every 2 years, and at some point BTRs and national communications will come together. Earlier this year, next slide please, the Secretariat published the second mandated report under the Gender Action Plan on the implementation of gender-responsive climate policies, plans, strategies and actions as reported by parties in regular reports and communications under the UNFCCC. The report makes an analysis of parties' progress in gender integration compared with the baseline established in the first report of a similar type, which was published in 2022. It takes into consideration the latest of each document type submitted by parties as at the 31st of July this year, meaning not just those submitted between 2022 and 2024, but all the latest reports. And you can see the numbers on this slide. Currently, 85.2% of parties refer to gender in their reports and communications, those that were assessed for the purpose of this report. The findings show that parties are increasingly integrating consideration of gender into their climate policies, plans, strategies and action, and systematically and substantively addressing gender across the reporting under the UNFCCC. Taking a closer look at NDCs over time, the figure shows that the snapshot of the status quo at the time for all the then most recent NDCs. In 2016, only a few parties referred to gender in their INDCs. An analysis conducted by WEDO at the time shows that the number was only slightly above 30%. And as you can see on the slide, the analysis of NDCs submitted since 2021 shows a trend of increasing gender considerations. It's encouraging to see an increase over time. And we know that the level of integration varies. The integration is relevant in ensuring transparency, for example, through collecting disaggregated data, developing gender indicators to accompany specific initiatives, enhancing integration of gender into measurement, reporting and verification systems, and implementing quotas to facilitate achieving gender balance among participants in and beneficiaries of adaptation action. Given the low number of BTRs that had been submitted by the time the synthesis report had been produced, because they're only due at the end of the year, there was no inclusion of the data from those reports, but some initial observations and considerations. Some of the other speakers during the session will provide more up-to-date information on gender in transparency. Thank you, and I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you very much. It was a very interesting overview. I think it reminded us well the mechanism or the architecture of the Paris Agreement, but also the Convention. So it's been a very nice set of the scene. And now I have the pleasure to introduce our second speaker, Verania Chao from Global Inclusive Advisor with the UNDP Climate Hub. Verania leads work on NDCs, gender equality and social inclusion, including initiatives with indigenous peoples and youth under the Climate Promise. So in this session, Verania will discuss opportunities for accessing climate finance to advance gender-responsive climate action. She will also share valuable insights on gender's role in transparency and key lessons from the Global Support Program. Verania, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and I hope you can hear me well. I'm getting a cold or a sore throat. I don't know, too many germs around. But yes, can you hear me now? Okay, perfect. That's not the presentation. That's not the slides. Yeah, no, that's not it. It says gender in transparency. Do you want me to come? Yeah, no. Okay, so I'll start. Thank you. Okay, well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation, and it is a pleasure for me to be here at this technical dialogue on gender in transparency. And as you know, this is a very relevant area of work that links to different policy and planning instruments, and specifically on the NDCs that I've worked so closely on. So just wanted to say that, this COP really marks this significant milestone as developing countries, and I focused on the work of developing countries because these are the countries that in collaboration, UNDP and UNEP work very closely to support their work, prepare their first biannual transparency reports, but of course this is something that both countries would need to address. And we expect countries to submit the BTRs by the end of 2024. So we have been collecting some information, but we will need to continue updating our analyses to make sure that we reflect the improvements and the challenges or gaps in our analysis. So let me also mention that UNDP and UNEP have a long-standing collaboration on this area of work. And so I'm here to share our joint efforts and experience of the support provided and the guidance to integrate gender considerations into national reporting to improve climate transparency. And we now have this new instrument that links to the NDC, as I mentioned, and in that sense provides additional information and opportunities to track concrete actions, and we expect to see many of these that are gender responsive. And in that sense, we want to make sure that this work basically includes addressing who participates, whose perspectives are included, gender-specific risks, and the types of support men and women require to shape climate action and influencing policy making and, of course, reporting. So on the slide that you are seeing here, based on this work that the UNEP cb88 Global Support Program and UNEP have been doing to support countries on the BURs, which is the previous instrument, now the BTRs and national communications. The data from 102 developing countries highlight both progress and the need for improvement in integrating gender into climate reporting. So while several countries report initiatives like gender-responsive indicators and disaggregated data, many still require enhanced guidance and capacity building to mainstream gender equality effectively into the transparency systems. So some of the key points that I would like to share with you today is that out of these 102 countries supported by GEF financing and in some cases bilateral financing too, and guidance not only from UNDP and UNEP, but also FAO is another UN agency that provides support, have worked to integrate gender into these various reporting instruments, the national communications, BURs, and BTRs. And so gender mainstreaming initiatives include disaggregated data in 47 countries, gender responsive indicators in 32 countries, and gender action plans in 37 countries. So we do expect countries to build upon this previous work and the capacities that they have built so far, for example, when it comes to the integration of gender considerations into the BURs, how that can translate into the new instrument. Of course, the process will need to be adjusted and refined. But the important message here is that countries can build on previous capacities and knowledge. There are 4 countries that have submitted BTRs, And we see 2 countries that have included explicit references on gender, Panama and Guyana. And we see that there are many more countries that at least have included specific references as their intention to incorporate gender perspectives into their BTRs by the end of this year. Next one, please. So I want to dive into an area that we know it's quite complex. So basically integrating gender into greenhouse gases inventories, which is I would say, one of the key core areas of the BTRs, remains a significant challenge. And this is mainly because traditional methodologies lack a gender lens. This slide highlights an example from Colombia showcasing steps to address these gaps by revising data tools, engaging diverse stakeholders, and including gender analyses mainly at the sectoral level. Countries can build more inclusive and effective greenhouse gases inventories. And there is still a lot of work to do on this area, but I would like to mention key points to consider for the BTRs, let's say first round, but of course, above all, for future BTRs. And this is the greenhouse gases inventories to focus on sector-based emissions. At this point, these are lacking demographic breakdowns, so it would be interesting to explore this area a bit more. And this, at the same time, limits the gender-specific insights. So combining the analysis of the sector-based emissions with the demographic breakdowns could provide an entry point. Another point here is the challenges include technical complexity because there is lack of guidelines, and there is also low awareness and prioritization by practitioners and the technical units supporting this work, as well as policymakers. So having here, let's say, a political will to explore further how we can incorporate this demographic and socioeconomic information, it could be a good opportunity. And in this regard, Colombia's approach includes revising these tools and adapting methods for gender data and embedding gender analysis in emissions accounting. So I think that we will hope to see more countries exploring these opportunities and linkages. Next one, please. Then on the second, I would say, key aspect of the reporting process on NDCs, we have also identified, that so the starting point should be the design, the planning. So then we can make sure that we can track and we can measure and we can report on what countries have planned and tracked. So NDCs become, in that sense, relevant, and not only relevant, but a starting point for BTRs. And in that sense, it's really important that that countries build on the second generation of NDCs to produce NDCs 3.0 that are far more concrete in terms of the gender responsive actions and measures, as well as to include indicators. Next one, please. Thank you. The other point that I would like to mention just briefly is that there are 2 more areas that are relevant to address. One is in relation to adaptation, and this also links to loss and damage. And that's where we have seen countries to make the link with gender and social inclusion more clearly. And this is also because countries have been able to identify specific characteristics in the sectoral analysis that relate to adaptation. So this is an area that could be a starting point for countries to strengthen the capacities that eventually can also be linked to sectors that are or have a specific impacts on both mitigations and adaptations, for example, such as forest. Next one, please. Just briefly mention about financing. That's another relevant area that will be covered under the reporting process. And it's important to understand, again, that as we and countries make sure that specifically references to gender responsive finance and gender budgeting processes and systems are well integrated into their implementation plans and eventually reported through the reporting systems such as the BTR, will allow to allocate better funding, more targeted and more effectively to different groups and different actors, specifically social actors that many times are invisible in this process, from the planning to the reporting. And finally, next one please. I just wanted to mention that, this slide highlights the importance of encouraging countries to enhance the implementation of gender-responsive approaches. As I said, from the planning to the reporting, to adequate a sustained domestic and international financing, linking to these gender-responsive measures or actions, to make sure that there is also policy coherence, so we make sure that we articulate the different gender-responsive measures or actions in, for example, adaptation plans or in the NDCs, and finally, to ensure that there is a good communication about the development and also the achievement of certain results that can be shared with other institutions within the country. So there is a learning process. As I said, this is something that is still in progress, and there needs to be a coordination that allows for arrangements in terms of collecting data, but also in terms of analyzing and using this data. So I will leave it at this for now. And then happy to complement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Verania. Thanks also for illuminating us on how countries are working towards gender-responsive reporting. Very interesting insights indeed. So now we are going to go to a questions and answers session. Please press the button of your microphones so we don't, only a few countries or places have plates, so we will go by numbers. Anyone?
Yes. It's done.
84. I see Chair 64, please.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I am Grace Balawag. I'm an Igorot indigenous woman from the Philippines, but I work with the Tibtiba Foundation. This is the Indigenous Peoples International Center for Policy Research and Education.
Can you please go closer to the microphone?
Okay.
Thank you.
I am talking on the floor on behalf of the Facilitative Working Group of the Local Communities and Indigenous Peoples Platform. Under the current work plan of the LCIP, the FWG has been mapping existing policies and actions and communications under the Convention and the Paris Agreement to assess whether and how they incorporate consideration and engagement of indigenous peoples and local communities. Our ongoing analysis shows that as of October 31, over 50% of the most recent nationally determined contributions and 70% of the biennial update reports include measures addressing indigenous peoples and local communities. These measures involve incorporating their knowledge systems, involving them in policy design, addressing their vulnerabilities, and focusing on their capacity building, technology, and financial needs to support climate adaptation and mitigation. However, these documents rarely highlight indigenous women or women from local communities, specifically, often grouping them under broader categories. During the LCIP GAP joint dialogue at COP27, which focused on advancing the leadership and highlighting the solutions of indigenous women and women from local communities in climate policy and action, it became evident that despite being disproportionately affected by climate change, Indigenous women and women from local communities have been using their knowledge and cultural values to find solutions and build resilience. Women have been playing a vital role in climate change adaptation by combining traditional knowledge with innovative practices. For example, in federal states of Micronesia, Chuk women preserve food security during droughts by drying and fermenting breadfruit. In Corsia, they use palm leaves to cool soil, while in Yap, they protect young taro plants by shading, transplanting, and mulching. Indigenous women have been leading their communities to restore ecosystems and nurturing native plant nurseries for food, medicine, and reforestation. The inclusion of disaggregated data in biennial transparency reports under the Enhanced Transparency Framework and upcoming national determined contributions is essential to highlight and strengthen the leadership that Indigenous women demonstrate in climate action, ensuring their unique contributions and perspectives are effectively represented and supported in climate policies and actions. Just recently, last Monday, at the opening plenary, the Baku Work Plan of the Local Communities and Indigenous Peoples Platform was adopted, the implementation of which will begin in 2025 until 2027. The FWG is keen to collaborate through the Gender Action Plan and work with constituted bodies such as the Consultative Group of Experts to promote inclusion of such disaggregated data in upcoming submissions by the parties. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those complimentary information. Anyone else? Would the speakers would like to react to that statement? Okay. Rania? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Just wanted to mention that, yeah, in fact, we are seeing, oh, sorry, that it's important to basically take into consideration that countries still need, and this is, I believe, an area of opportunity to include an intersectional approach into the analysis that they're doing, and therefore into the data that they are using. And it seems to me that perhaps there may be also some kind of confusion in terms of some concepts or terms. This approach would allow for countries to identify the different layers that many times cause discrimination, for example, in one person or a group of people. So what we have seen is that there is a lot of efforts for integrating, for example, gender and making explicit references to women's empowerment, which we, of course, think that it's important progress. We see less considerations that specifically look at these different dimensions or aspects, and in that sense, I think that that's why we're not seeing explicit considerations that address perhaps the needs and the priorities of, for example, in this particular case, indigenous peoples as actors that have their own specific context. So, yeah.
Thank you, Verania. I think we can allow one more question before continuing with our panelists.
Excuse me, can I ask a question?
Chair number 42, please.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Meena Bilgi from India.
Sorry, can you please come closer to the microphone?
Can you hear me, please? Yeah, I am Dr. Meena Bilgi from India, and I am talking on behalf of civil society organization. I'm just wondering about gender budgeting. I mean, many of the countries have committed to gender budgets. I am speaking from the point of view of India. It's started from 2005, and I did analysis as part of my PhD specifically in the agriculture sector, and I see that gender budgets are kind of stagnant. I mean, nothing, it seems to be a lip service rather than, and it is not matching with the public policy. So that is my concern. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think Verania, that was for you.
Yes, thank you. So I think this is the opportunity that linking the planning with the reporting process through very concrete instruments can provide evidence of these gaps. So, for example, the BTRs are expected to enable tracking of gender-focused, for example, financing or specific actions that would be meant to be implemented, and in that sense would require allocation of funds. But in that sense, that's why it's important to, at the same time, strengthen, for example, the capacities within governments in order to align these actions to national budgets and the budgeting cycle. And this is sometimes where we see that there is a disconnect between the not having a very concrete action that at the same time can be included in the budgeting frameworks and specific timelines. We have seen interesting examples, for example, from Kenya. It would be nice if someone from Kenya can provide additional information where they have, for example, made the effort to incorporate these aspects into their Vision 2030 and starting to align through their annual budgeting processes the prioritization of those actions that will be implemented. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much to the audience and panelists for your engaging questions and thoughtful answers. We now move to the second segment of our gathering, of this technical dialogue, where we will hear from our speakers about existing options and country experiences related to gender in transparency. So it is my pleasure now to introduce our first panelist for this segment, Jamie Van Besson. Jamie manages partnerships with USAID and NORAD, including the Advancing Gender in the Environment program, the Gender-Based Violence and Environment Linkages Center, and the Resilient, Inclusive, and Sustainable Environments Grants Challenge. With expertise in strategy, monitoring, and evaluation, and integrated communications, Jamie drives gender mainstreaming and empowerment efforts across IUCN, global networks, and portfolios. So, Jamie, please, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. And esteemed colleagues, friends, first, a very kind thanks to organizers and co-panelists and all of you, the participants, for joining this session. I'd like to start by just sharing a frequent refrain I'm sure we've all heard, which is that we need information and evidence-based policies and decisions. And we've often heard that there is a lack of gender and environment data that prevents the increase in informed and mainstreamed actions. But I am very sorry, I very respectfully disagree. We can always use more. We can always have strengthened and improved gender and environment data, which also needs, of course, financing and dedication, but we do have enough data and information to establish urgency and inform targeted and meaningful action. So I am glad that this COP has promoted and highlighted the need for gender and data transparency. Another refrain that we often hear that I wanted to remind us all of is, nothing about us without us. So what I wanted to take a moment and address is what about the availability of data sources that include and embody diversity and inclusion? Next slide, please. So I'm here to represent the Gender and Environment Data Alliance, or JADA. And we at IUCN are a co-founder, and we are also a co-convener of JADA with the Women's Environment and Development Organization, WEDO. And as co-conveners and as an alliance, we decided that we wanted to use this time to offer some insights about JADA and to share a few of our thoughts. Now, 17 organizations co-founded JADA a few years ago, and today we are over 100 organizations from all over the world and over 25 gender and environment data advisors. We are all working to enhance the production and use of gender and environment data and ensure that this is done with a feminist and participatory lens that leaves no one behind. So as just one quick example, JADA recently found that over 90% of academic publications spanning 82 countries focused on low income and lower middle income countries, but the authorship comes from the global north. And as this session asks us to discuss and consider tools and frameworks for gender and data transparency, I want to use this time to encourage using networks like JADA as a tool or a platform of diverse gender and environment data producers. Also because we, as the people, and all of our lived experiences, our professional experiences, we ourselves are an important resource to draw from, and we are also dedicated data producers and analysts as well. Under JADA, I wanted to share that we work collaboratively to produce briefs and calls to action. We collate and disseminate the work of members who often collaborate and amplify attention by organizing events, training sessions, capacity development, such as the capacity building workshop on gender and environment data for BTRs and NDCs that we just held a few days ago. We also organized last year's Global Gender and Environment Data Conference, for which we also supported a second iteration ahead of the Convention on Biological Diversity's recent COP16. So just taking a moment, and you'll see it on the screens here, I wanted to share that a proposed framing that came from the call to action that emerged from these conferences that have also been validated through these conferences. By far and large, we called for 5 priorities that focused on the ethical and inclusive production, use, and uptake of gender and environment data. And we also called for increased finance and the strengthening Sorry, small technical difficulty. Life happens. Thank you so much for taking a moment. So just real briefly about the call to action, we called for 5 priorities that focused on the ethical and inclusive production, use, and uptake of gender and environment data. And we also called for increased finance and strengthening of multi-stakeholder partnerships for gender and environment data. Now, the majority of JADA members are also represented from the global majority, and we've also established a number of data production and management grants, also to global majority grassroots data producers, and we do hope to share the results of their research very soon with you. Next slide. And I also wanted to share that members generate tools that use different lenses that we can also consider for gender and environment data, and as well as transparency. So for example, we just shared this a couple of days at the workshop that I just mentioned, but for example, WEDO has a gender and climate tracker, as well as a new checklist for NDCs that will hopefully be very useful for parties and stakeholders. And IUCN and UN Women and the KSHAC Institute have been collaborating on a gender and climate policy scorecard to assess upcoming NDCs around the totality of the experiences in the world of women and gender equality, and to also begin to track the implementation of gender commitments themselves. Next slide, please. So, my call here is to say to please engage and use JADA and networks like JADA as a resource. We are here to support your efforts to gender and climate transparency goals. And we also invite you to champion the inclusive production and use of gender and environment data. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jamie, for those insights. And now I'm going to call our colleague from Jeff, Patricia Marcos Huidoro. She's Senior Climate Change Specialist and Regional Coordinator for Latin America at the GEF, with more than 18 years of experience in the management and implementation of climate change and renewable energy projects in development agencies and the private sector. At the GEF, Patricia is responsible for reviewing climate change proposals, implementing impact programs, and participating in relations with the UNFCCC. So she's the person to go when it comes to asking for support. Patricia, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Miriam, can you hear me? Because if I try to get closer to the mic, I will disconnect everything. Well, let me know. Thank you so much. Thank you, Miriam. Thank you, everyone, for inviting the GEF to this relevant event. I am a senior climate change specialist at the GEF. I am not the gender focal point, but I will explain a little bit about what the GEF does in gender and transparency. So if we go to the next slide, the GEF is a global partnership. It's a family of funds. As the largest environmental multi-donor trust fund, we are the financial mechanism, or we are the operational entity of the financial mechanism of 6 international environmental conventions, including the UNFCCC. So as the operational entity of the UNFCCC, and we go to the next slide, we do receive guidance from UNFCCC on specific aspects. Actually, in 2020, we were asked by the UNFCCC to help developing countries implement the Article 13 of the Paris Agreement. So how does the GEF support the ETF? So since we received the guidance, we have created 3 different pillars through which we provide support to transparency. The first one on the left side is reporting. We do provide financing, grant financing to developing countries for developing their BTR and NCs. The second pillar is capacity building. We created the what we call cb88 Capacity Building Initiative for Transparency. Is a smaller fund within the GEF. That we provide capacity building support to countries in implementing the Article 13 of the Paris Agreement, and I will explain that a little bit in a moment. And then we have a third pillar that is the global support that we provide, that our colleague Verania explained earlier about the cb88 GSP and all the support that we provide through that global support program. So if we go to the next slide, this is the support we have provided so far with regards to biennial transparency report. So we have provided finance for 150 BTRs in 106 countries since 2020. This support has channeled more than 100 million in BTRs. And as you can see in the slide, we have provided support to BTR1 to more than 100 countries. You see, we have tried to provide support in combination with the national communication. So countries, they can actually decide the type of support they want for the GEF. We can provide support for a standalone BTR. We can provide support for a combined BTR national communication, or we can provide support for BTR1, BTR2, and national communication. And this combined option was created in a way to facilitate transactions. So instead of having 3 different projects for each of the reports, we have one combined project in which we are providing support to countries as they need it. So we approve BTR1, BTR2, and national communication, but we only disbursed the amount for the BTR, and then we disburse the second amount as countries complete their BTR1s. Countries, they can have access to this financial support. This financial support is not part of the country allocations that countries have. And the GEF is a little bit different from other climate funds in the sense that most of our resources, they are distributed to our recipient countries at the beginning of our replenishment cycle. So all the countries, they have a national allocation for a 4-year cycle, and they can spend those resources as they want for the priorities, for the environment priorities they have in their countries. But however, national communications and BTRs, the funding is coming from another window. So we are not tapping into the national allocations of the countries. And I think this is very, very important, and is aligned with the guidance that we received from UNFCCC. And I wanted to stop here to mention, to make this clarification about how we work, because there has been a lot of interest from other countries like Brazil, India, Malaysia, Mexico, and Nigeria, and they're using their national allocation is what we call STAR resources to complement the resources that we are providing for VTR and national communication development. We work with 4 agencies, through 4 agencies for the implementation of this report, which are UNEP, UNDP, FAO, and UNIDO. Yeah, thank you. And the second pillar, you may recall, we have the pillar on reporting, we have the global support that Berania was talking about, and the second pillar is about the capacity building component of the support that we provide. So this is what we call Capacity Building Initiative for Transparency, or cb88. And all our recipient countries, they can have access to these resources. Again, those are no national resources, those are additional resources. All the countries, recipient countries are eligible to request that. And it's really, really, really flexible. It supports capacity building for transparency in the countries, and countries, they can customize the support that they need. So we have countries that they are using the resources for building the capacity within the governments. Others are using the resources for building their MRB, monitoring and verification systems. Others are focusing on their GHG registries. Others are focusing on helping put in place the infrastructure for carbon, for Article 6 carbon markets. So, and others are using it for a combination of all the things that I've been, of all the activities that I've been mentioning. So it's really, really flexible, and it's really up to the countries on how they can structure their CB88 projects. We have so far funded 100 projects in 90 countries. For a value of approximately 168 million. The projects are progressing really well. Implementation is advancing a lot, and actually 19 countries have already finalized their CB88-1, and 8 of them, they are in the process of requesting support for CB88-2. So if we have countries here that they haven't tapped into the CB88 resources, I really encourage you to reach out to us. These are really, really flexible resources, and yeah, they're not using your national allocation. So if we can move to the next one now, where does gender falls within everything that I've been saying? Okay, so the GEF has a gender. Oh, I need to finish? Okay. The GEF has a gender policy that was adopted in 2017. It's a really ambitious policy with what we have before. I would like to mention maybe that in addition to what is gender-sensitive indicator and sex disaggregated target, we have something new in our policy that is all our activities and components, they need to be gender responsive, and they need to include gender into their implementation. And this is really important because we usually have the gender action plan that is an attached document, but through incorporating gender into the activities and components, like the project managers, they really need to think how to mainstream gender into the project, and that has been a big change since the adoption of the new policy, gender equality policy at the GEF. I have more examples I'm happy to discuss later, but I know we are running out of time. Thank you.
Indeed, we are running a little bit out of time, so thank you very much for that insight and an overview of how and where the GEF is providing support through different approaches for reporting, for the CB88, the Global Support Program, etc. So I think we will have time to answer questions later. Now I'll go to another initiative, the Initiative for Climate Action Transparency. I'll invite Celeste Gonzalez to present what ICAD is doing and how it is contributing to address gender issues in different methodologies that they are providing. So Celeste is a program officer at UNOPS. She supports ICAT's country and regional engagement and the ICAT toolbox. So a little bit of Celeste. Before joining UNOPS, she was climate policy analyst at Climate Analytics in Berlin, focusing always in Latin America. She also coordinated Paraguay's national GHG inventory for the Ministry of Environment and UNDP. Celeste, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I will try to keep brief, but I'm very happy to be here. I also thank the organizer, and I'm happy to join this magnificent panel. So today I will briefly present what have been done in ICAT. The newest ICAT tool is a gender guide with good practices that's been designed to help countries integrate gender into climate transparency framework. It is a crucial step in ensuring that our climate actions are inclusive and equitable, addressing the unique vulnerabilities women and marginalized groups face in the face of climate change. Next one, please. But before we jump into talking about the gender new tool, allow me to remind why we're talking about transparency. There is a dual objective of the Paris Agreement, Article 13. First one is to build mutual trust and confidence among countries through transparent reporting. As we already heard, this year is the BTR year, so we're expecting to see reports coming soon. And the second objective is to support the effective implementation of the Paris Agreement through sound data and information. This second objective is often forgotten, but highly relevant for policymakers. Transparency can provide the basis of strengthening the NDCs, guiding and supporting climate action at the national level so that it can be targeted and, of course, effective. ICAT is a global initiative that is already supporting over 50 countries around the world. It's a multi-donor initiative. And we are helping to build effective transparency frameworks to support the Paris Agreement. So they have the data and process to take effective climate action. Next one, please. One of the areas of ICAT, as well as supporting the direct, tailored for the countries, is to develop tools and guidance upon request of the countries. And one of those was we need to have more information about how to integrate gender into climate action. ICAT has a specialized area who is working with and now develop over 50 tools that is led by Dr. Hannah, who's based in Copenhagen. And this new guide and tool is expected to be used, hopefully, for the countries. First, it's important to understand why gender equity is essential to achieve the Paris Agreement goal, and why is it essential for transparency. We know that climate change affects men and women differently, exacerbating existing gender inequalities. It has long been recognized that on average, women are more vulnerable to men to the impacts of climate change. Gender-responsive climate policies improve the effectiveness of climate action, making it more inclusive and sustainable. We know that incorporating gender into climate transparency frameworks like the ETF under the Paris Agreement will help to track the progress and address this gap in gender equality. Next one, please. As I mentioned, the newest ICAT working paper provides recommendations based on good practices from countries, from real experience, to integrate gender in climate reporting and transparency. This document includes a rationale for the importance of integrating gender into climate data under the ETF of the Paris Agreement, and principles for gender disaggregated data collection, where it's important to take intersectionality into account, but by linking gender with factors such as cultural, location, and address inequalities. The paper also includes recommendations in how to mainstream gender in the biennial transparency report, where guidelines are based on case studies from different countries, going from Latin America region, Africa, and Pacific, showing real impacts into the gender-responsive data. The data is essential for informed policymaking, ensuring that climate actions address the need for both men and women and helps reduce the gender inequalities. Next one, please. I invite you to download the ICAT gender working paper and start using it to strengthen your climate transparency effort. By mainstreaming gender, we can make climate policy more inclusive, effective, and equitable. Please take a time to explore the guide of good practice and see how it can support your work on gender-responsive climate action. Next one. The previous one. In this link, you can download the guide, and we're also open to receiving feedback about this new report, because we want to keep as an instrument that's changing and flexible according to the experience of the country. ICAT has also developed other tools that can be used in conjunction with this one and combined, such as the Climate Finance Transparency Newest Guide. So I also invite you to take a look at the tools and use it accordingly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Celeste. It was a very interesting overview of ICAT as well, and how it's contributing to at least increase the knowledge in how to mainstream gender in transparency. So it's another moment now for questions and answers. We are opening the floor. We will allow 10 minutes, more or less, for discussions. So please make questions. I think you're lucky, no questions. I know. We have the European Union, please.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, colleagues. And we would actually like to express our gratitude and thanks for this day around gender, and for the presidency for highlighting and raising awareness on the importance of reporting on gender in our reports. Of course, we in our member states, we fully support this initiative on emphasizing on the importance of including gender responsive information in our BTRs and in all our different policies. As you might know, but maybe not, the EU has been doing quite a lot on that front for some time. We do see progress, but one thing is certain, the gaps are still there, which means there's still work to do. And we have started working indeed on disaggregated gender data, and we see how challenging it could be for us, so we know it might be challenging for others, and this is why we would like to thank ICAT and the colleague from Jeff from showing example with this guide on how to use the data and how to integrate them into the reports, and looking really forward to how all of this would materialize in our BTRs to come, perhaps not this first one, but in the others to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? So it's time for you to take the floor and ask questions for our colleagues from the JEF and from ICAT. Do we proceed? All right, so let's continue. I think at the end, you can think of your questions for both ICAT and the JEF, as we will have some more time at the end for questions and answers. So we will now have discussions on the real world. I don't mean that what was presented is not the real world. I think we have heard a very interesting collection and recollection of what has been done and is being done with regards to mainstreaming gender in transparency. But I think it's going to be interesting to hear from the countries examples of catalyzing change, starting with a closer look to countries. So I think we have Georgia, is it? Yes. we have our good colleague from Georgia, Kakabar Mdivani, from the National Gender Focal. He's the National Gender Focal Point for Georgia. He will be sharing us the experience in the country on how they are addressing this issue. Babakar, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear moderator. Good day, everybody. It is really a pleasure to be presented in this room and share the experience that might be helpful for the countries. So let me start with the remark that was mentioned by other colleagues, that everything starts from the planning, especially when we are talking about to create the data that has never been before aggregated. And for this, Georgia decided to make this kind of assignment for all the projects that is ongoing inside the country under the climate change umbrella. So with this, we considered that the NDC is the best document to guide the country in this direction. And one of its para defines the requirement for the project that is ongoing in Georgia to provide the disaggregated data in gender-responsive manner. With this, so it's happened back in 2021 when we published our first updated NDC. So afterwards, we were all experienced the process how this really implemented inside the country. The process was quite interesting, and I'd like to thank Global Environment Facility, UNEP, and UNDP for supporting us in this direction. We had managed to start this process under the CBIT project, where we worked in different municipalities and started to gather the data, disaggregated level, mostly that was related to the capacity building activities inside the country. And the experience from our side was like that. We created the special modalities for the capacity building events, and our facilitator was mandated and capacitated in a way to do the workshops and discussions gender equal perspective, and as much as possible to be integrated in a discussions women positions. Afterwards, we reached the level when we have to report back to the whole world about the progress of climate change activities within the first BTR. And within the first BTR, we had sort of the dilemma how to resolve this when we don't have actually the official guidance for the gender representation in the document, in this such kind of document. So we decided to address Lima work program and present information how country is following the work program and what are still needed to be updated. With this analysis, I'd be happy to share with you with this dashboard just few examples. The analysis of the activities that is dedicated to NDC implementation was revealed that we have the energy efficiency sector that is well elaborated and incorporates the women's role in the process, and same position has the forest sector inside the country. But what we are missing, and we are missing the other sectors, such kind of information. And as an example, now I introduce the transport sector and building sector. So with these two sectors, the most important thing that our analysis show that in a transport system, especially when we're talking about the low carbon development, we need to disaggregate our transport fleet. So in this regard, we have the priorities for the public bus utilization, and we had a very nice analysis results in this regard, that the bus stops and bus lines are, and especially itself the buses, currently still not fully takes into consideration women's needs, especially mothers who are taking care of their children, and they dedicated to have the special roads that would be safer for the children. So these are just an example to share with you that this is direction I guess we will continue work. With regards to the building sector, it is revealed that mostly in the households, women are the people who really use the energy. So they have the best knowledge how to use the devices that is dedicated for the households, either it's the cook stoves or the other facilities. So with this, we need, when we're talking about the transformative changes in the households, low carbon development, we need their ideas to be incorporated in a process. Their experiences is very, very, very valuable in this process. So to summarize this part, this is the areas where you all see when we publish first BTR, this kind of recommendations are already in the document, and country considers to take this document as a guidance for the next round of the BTR. So that was the experience from Georgia's side, and I'd be happy to answer your questions when we reach that session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, for those insights from Georgia. Indeed, it's a good example of how they are also mainstreaming or integrating gender. And I see the importance of disaggregating data as well, because only then we will be able to see where to improve things. And it's good to know that there is already some gender sensitivity in two sectors that usually is men-dominated, let's say, in energy efficiency and transport. So let's move on to our next speaker. We will hear another compelling example from Amelia Nairoba, is Principal Researcher Officer at the Department for Women under the Ministry of Women, Children and Social Protection from Fiji. Amelia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and happy Gender Day to everyone. And that's also on behalf of the Pacific Seeds Ministerial and Technical Gender team that's in the room this afternoon. On behalf of the Fiji government, I would like to thank the Secretariat for providing the opportunity for Fiji for this intervention and to share the work we're doing with the ultimate goal of achieving gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. So the Department for Women, also known as the National Women's Machinery, is mandated to coordinate, advocate, and provide policy advice to government on issues pertaining to all women and girls. So for us, since the development of the National Gender Policy in 2014, this had provided sector-specific directions on how we incorporate gender perspectives into policies and plans and budgeting across government ministries and departments. So we have also observed over the years, and even till today, that ministries have taken ownership of developing their own gender policy and also having incorporation of climate resilience strategies and plans. Just to name a few, the gender policy within the agriculture sector with the Ministry of Agriculture and Waterways, Ministry of Finance having their own gender policy as well, and also with the Ministry of Home Affairs through the Fiji Military Force. They even taken initiatives of even wanting to have a gender advisor in the sector as well. So these are some of the things that we've seen that have evolved over the years and have improved, that even government ministries, not only within the Ministry of Women, that have taken initiative to have gender policies. And that just shows the recognition of how critical having gender perspectives been incorporated into the policies and plans across sectors. So now that we're in the process of reviewing our national gender policy, and we've also seen for the past few years, we were having a gender mainstreaming approach. Now it's become a flagship program of government since the inception of 2020, the Gender Transformative Institutional Capacity Development Initiative. This is an initiative that we have done across government ministries, meaning training our government officials to be able to identify, integrate women and girls' concerns, perspectives, needs that needs to be incorporated in their policies and plans. Yeah? And we're grateful for the New Zealand government and also the government of Canada, and also with our CSO partner, Fiji Women's Rights Movement, who've been supporting the ministry. And also the work that we're doing in terms of gender mainstreaming is also supporting and complementing the gender responsive planning and budgeting that the Ministry of Finance is currently undertaking. And that's across the government as well, with the support of ADB. And also, like I've mentioned earlier, the ultimate goal of these initiatives is to be able to train our government officials. We might not be there every day with our government officials to be looking into their policies and plans with the national women's machinery. That's why we have named this as institutional capacity development. We are training government officials to be gender experts, to have the gender lenses when they're looking at the policies and plans. They're able to articulate that, and also having the technical knowledge, evidence-based, and also specifically in identifying the concerns and needs of women and girls. And we'll be able to do that once we have provided that capacity building, and transformative changes will be happening once we have that lenses with all our government officials. As we all know, gender responsive governance is a whole of government approach that recognizes that all public institutions have a strong role to play in promoting gender equality and inclusiveness for all women and girls. So for us, moving forward in terms of the work of the ICD, our gender transformative approach, we are currently in the design phase of looking at what were the challenges for the past 5 years since we developed the ICD work, and together with the GRPB work with the Ministry of Finance. And we do hope that we'll be addressing and monitoring the impacts of having to have gender perspectives in policies and plans, and also with our climate change sectors, and also with our disaster sectors as well in Fiji. And also, in 2023, we were able to launch a Fiji Country Gender Assessment that is the first of its kind that's been led by government. Having to have a comprehensive report of where women and girls stand across the sectors of health, education, violence against women, the economy, social norms, women in development. And we have a specific chapter who is looking at environment. And we've identified that we need to have more sexes disaggregated data and also analysis to be able to see the margins and also the challenges that women face when it comes to climate change and disaster. And on that note, talking of the margins of gender statistics, UN Women Office in Bangkok, and also with our National Statistics Office in Fiji, with the Climate Change Division, and also National Disaster Management Office and other government ministries, we've had talks and discussions in terms of identifying what are the critical data that we need to have in order to identify the challenges, the impacts of women and girls on the ground when it comes to climate change and disaster. So these are some of the initiatives that we have undertaken as well, and also identifying what are setting the climate change, disaster, gender-related indicators. Those are some of the things that we have tried to come up with as well. So when we're reporting in such platforms such as COP, through the enhanced Lima framework and gender action plans, these are some of the things that we hope that we'll be able to respond to it. And also with the ministry, we have a gender climate change, disaster risk reduction, dedicated desk that will be able to look into adaptation, mitigation work, and also resilience work that we're doing with our development partners as well, and also protection, And for our involvement here at the COP as a National Women's Machinery, I must say it's the first time for us to be at this platform. And it's very interesting one is to actually train our climate change division officers, training our government officials, but also we as National Women's Machinery to be able to understand the climate change spaces and also understanding how this works at this global level. So when we are here, we're actually voicing the concerns of our women and girls in this platform. So we're grateful through the coordination of the Climate Change Division, we were able to make inputs to the national determined contribution for Fiji, which I'm sure it's under review. And there's discussions around having to undertake gender training for our Climate Change Division officers. Something is to have gender responsive NDCs, policies and plans, unless and until we train our officers who are doing the right things. That's one very critical component that we would like to see, that we institutionalize gender perspectives unless and until they know the intersectionalities that lies and the challenges that women go through. So that's one of the critical components that we're currently doing in Fiji, and we're grateful for the development partners, across government officials and government ministries that we're working very closely with on this, and also identifying that how do we strengthen these, understand the intersectionalities for them to be able to understand that. So when they're coming in negotiation rooms as such, they're able to understand what are the dynamics around it when it comes to gender mainstreaming, identifying gender perspectives in all that they do with our Climate Change Division and also with our National Disaster Risk Management Office as well. So with Fiji, we recognize that in order to accelerate the status of women and girls, it requires a more integrated, sector-specific with evidence-based approach, whole of government and population collaborations for transformative change and the impacts at all levels of society, and building resilience and sustainable measures is critical when addressing intersectionalities at all levels of our society. So this will instigate better coordination, building institutional expertise and competencies of our government officials in Fiji, and through gender analytical skills that would foster growth, integrated financing and resourcing, inclusivity, and sustainable development from now and beyond. So I hope whatever interventions I provide today will give you the indication of what Fiji, and also we're working, we hope to replicate this across the Pacific Island countries through the support of our development partners. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Melia. That was very inspiring. And also, obviously, the presentation from our colleague from Georgia. And I hope these two presentations have inspired the audience to make statements, questions, congratulations to the panelists here, etc. So please, we have at least 15 minutes from now on for the question and answers session. So I invite you to do so. Thank you, European Union, for breaking the ice again. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I would just like to take this opportunity to thank both colleagues, our colleague from Fiji and from Georgia, for sharing with us their experience. And it shows that disaggregating gender data goes to so many different lenses, that sharing of experience is really enlightening and enriching for us and the way forward. I would just like to share with my colleague from Fiji just a simple example at the EU level. Our president, when she took office in 2019, stated that she wanted a gender equal EU at all management level, because the decisions that we take they are signed and drafted by managers. So she ensured that she had a more balanced gender at that level. And at the end of her mandate, we had around 48%, over almost 49% of women in middle management and management. So thank you for sharing, and again, congratulations.
Thank you for that, European Union. Have more questions, interventions? No? Someone from the panel would like to complement the presentations? I think we rushed you at the beginning. Patricia, maybe? I think we cut you when you were starting to give insights on gender-focused support from the JEF. So maybe you would like to take advantage of the moment and complement.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Miriam. Building on what our colleagues from Georgia and Fiji said, I wanted to complement by saying that giving an example of under the cb88, the capacity building for initiative transparency that I was mentioning before, I wanted to share the case of Uruguay. Actually, they were invited to the panel, but I don't think they could make it. So Uruguay has a really active capacity building project, and they incorporated a gender-sensitive approach into their national climate action initiative within the cb88 project. So this has contributed to create a gender-sensitive monitoring system for the NDC. And it turns out to be really successful. They are now implementing their second cb88 project. And again, this monitoring system, gender-sensitive monitoring system for the NDC is being replicated in other countries, and we are putting them in touch with other countries so they can learn from their experience and their lessons learned. So just to provide an example of how we are trying to mainstream gender consideration through the transparency project that we are financing, either through the cb88 or the BTR and NDCs. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Patricia. So, well, if no questions or more statements, I think we need to start wrapping up. At the end, everyone has to attend negotiations, but I will remain to the disposal of the organizers to give me orders. All right, so I think it's been a very interesting an interesting session where with very well structured, with presentations setting the scene, where we've heard the context under which this mandated event is organized. Thank you very much to the Secretariat for doing so, for inviting this selected panel. I think the information that was shared here resonates a lot on the importance of having first data and disaggregated data, the importance of data itself in making policy. We've heard as well what tools and what support is there for in general for transparency, but also for mainstreaming gender in transparency. And I think going beyond, I think the effort is not to mainstream gender in transparency in NDC. It is actually mainstreaming gender in public policy, in sustainable development. At the end, I think it is even going to the roots of our national constitutions and put there what the European Union highlighted, the equity part of the balance between men and women, and make justice to gender equality in general. So we have also heard from support providers, as I said, 2 different initiatives, the JEF, which sort of implements they are the financial mechanism of the convention anyway. So through different approaches, they provide support for, in general, for capacity building, for transparency. Patricia explained different modalities of how it's done. There are the Global Support Program, not only one programs, also by the FAO, which is more sector focused. There is the direct support to countries through the cb88. You all know you are developing your structures, your policies for managing data. We have also heard two very good examples at country level on how these efforts of mainstreaming gender are being done. I was particularly impressed and inspired by how our colleagues from Georgia and Fiji are doing this. And I think whatever we do in public policy, it starts by mainstreaming in general development policies. So we've heard, for example, gender policy, how important it is to have gender policy. I think for everything we do, there needs to be a dedicated policy, but not only a policy, but also the means for implementing it. And Fiji actually stressed as well that if you don't also include this in the budgeting, it will remain in the shelves. So I think it's been a very interesting questions. We were also reminded about the enhanced transparency framework. As you know, this comes as a let's say as a need for transitioning to a more rigorous way of doing reporting. So. And then now we have two reporting tracks, the reporting to the convention. I think we will still hear about the national communications. Then we have the reporting through the enhanced transparency framework of the Paris Agreement, which is stated in the Article 13. And then you parties have agreed on modalities, procedures, and guidelines in Katowice, and it's a very comprehensive guidelines, but it's very rigorous. So we will see in this first BTR how good the progress is being done for different aspects of this reporting from countries. Our colleagues have mentioned what is the BTR constituted by. So countries will be presenting the GHG inventories, the NDC tracking, and how countries are going to report support provided, that's by the developed countries, and how developing countries are also, let's say, measuring and monitoring support received and needed. So these different elements will show how best we are doing. But this session was obviously on mainstreaming gender, and hopefully we will also learn more and beyond what was presented here from what is coming in these reports through the national communications, through the BORs, how and where countries are mentioning the gender mainstreaming. But as I said at the beginning, I think we need to go beyond from putting this in the paper. We need to see in implementation how well we are doing. You've heard from different initiatives, very insightful initiatives. Please don't go home just, I went to this session, use the tools that have been provided. They are very interesting, and I think, as I say always, anything we do in this world of climate change has been learning by doing. So I think we will continue learning, we will continue sharing also is an important aspect of the learning. So I think with this, I thank you very much. I think it's been a very insightful session. I've learned a lot myself, so I congratulate our panelists as well here, and I thank them a lot, and you for having here, for being here and listening to these interesting insights. Thank you.
you.